All right, welcome everybody. We'll give it another moment or so as people enter our virtual auditorium. Really glad to have you for our webinar series. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our UCI Working Well Remotely webinar series. Our topic this week is Give Yourself a Break, Caring for Yourself and Everyone Else. Hopefully many of you had an extra break this weekend with an extra long weekend, but you'll learn a lot more tips on how to do that coming up here. So very excited to have you here. My name is Pamela James. I am the Executive Director for Campus Human Resources, and I'll be your MC today. And before we get to introducing the panel, the co-host and the speaker, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, this webinar is one of 8 weeks of webinars that we have. This is week 4. And those are being recorded and are available on our website. So if you look in the chat box, we're going to put where our website is. In addition to these 8 weeks of topics, we have last fall's series. We did 7 different topics last fall. Those recordings and the materials are also available on our website. So if you missed those, or if you have colleagues, friends, family who might benefit from this year's topics plus last year's, those are going to be available. Those are available to you. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This is a Zoom webinar versus a Zoom meeting, which you might be used to the Zoom meetings. So what a webinar means is that you can see myself, our co-hosts, and our speaker, but we can't see you, audio only. So what that means is we'd love to hear from you, but through the Q&A function. So you'll see a little box down at the bottom, Q&A. So during the course of Claire's content, feel free to submit questions there, and then Hal and Brian and I will be monitoring those questions, and you hopefully will get to all of them. If we don't, we're actually going to ask Claire to answer them offline, and after the session, we'll be able to send the answers out to any questions that we don't get to. So feel free to have your questions ready. We're also recording this session, and it is available. All right, so on to the main event. Very excited that we have Hal Stern with us today. Hal's our Interim Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor of Academic Planning. So Hal, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, your role at UCI, and why you might be interested in this particular topic yourself.
Thanks, Pamela. It's great to be here, and I welcome all those attending. Thank you for being here as well. The series has been extremely well received last year and so far this year, and I'm pleased to be able to participate today. This is my 19th year on campus after being in a couple of other universities. I'm a professor in the statistics department with my starting point for the last year, actually starting last March, which was a fairly eventful month for all of us. I was appointed interim provost and executive vice chancellor. A brief word about what those jobs entail. So the provost is the chief academic officer of the university. And in that role, basically all of the deans who lead the academic units report to me, and I work with the deans on curriculum and other aspects of our degree programs. The executive vice chancellor title is, as the name implies, the executive vice chancellor. That is, there's a chancellor, a series of vice chancellors handling all kinds of things like our research enterprise, our space enterprise, human resources, and the like. And so as the executive vice chancellor, I'm something like the chief administrative officer or chief operational officer, working with all those people on those aspects. So currently, for example, the academic side is worried about the planning for, say, fall and what that looks like. And on the operational side, we're spending a lot of time thinking about, how we manage the the coronavirus on campus and the budget consequences of that. So like all of you, I imagine, the pandemic has really made work a challenge for me. And I think the topic here is relevant to all of us. I don't actually have young children anymore. My children are out of the house. But my wife would be the first to tell you that I definitely need to learn how to give myself a break, not to mention to give her some time as well. So I'm very excited to hear Claire's remarks. So thank you, Pamela. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Great. Happy to have you, Hal. Thank you. Next, we have Brian O'Day. Brian's over at the Medical Center. He's the Executive Director of Marketing and Communications. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, your background, and why this topic is of interest to you?
Sure. Thank you, Pamela. I have been out here for 2 years. As a matter of fact, my 1-year anniversary was the day the WHO declared that the coronavirus was a pandemic. So my first year, I was really glad I came out here. But after this last year, I got to tell you, I'm even more impressed, especially with everything that's going on the health side. I mean, the way our team has risen to the occasion is really, really remarkable. The things going on here at Health are truly inspiring. My background is in healthcare marketing. You may hear a touch of an accent in my voice. I don't hear it myself, but I come from Boston, where I worked for Partners Healthcare for 22 years before deciding to come out here and really help tell UCI Health's really amazing story. It is a great story. In my role, I have the privilege of really being able to tell about the incredible patient care and innovation that goes on here at UCI Health, and really make sure that that our community has all the information they need to choose to get their health care at UCI Health. So I'm looking forward to putting the pandemic behind us and getting back to that important work. Now I will go ahead and introduce our speaker. Claire Goss is the Manager of Family Education and Resources at Bright Horizons. In her role, Claire oversees outreach to families so that they feel included in and supported through their child's education. Claire has worked for more than 15 years as a parenting and child development educator, researcher, and writer. Claire, take it away.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I had a big smile on my face because I am located outside of Boston, and I did pick up on a little bit of an accent. I am just so thrilled to be here today. What an honor to speak to such a huge community. As Brian mentioned, I'm the Manager of Family Education and Resources at Bright Horizons. So I spend a lot of time talking to caregivers, supporting caregivers. I have a master's in child development from Tufts, and I've worked as a preschool teacher. I have worked as a parenting educator, a child development researcher and writer. I've been in the field for a long time. Perhaps more importantly, I myself have been a caregiver. I have taken care of my dad after surgeries. I have taken care of my mom during an extended serious illness. And I have 3 children. My kids are 12, 10, and 7 years old. So I'm kind of in that sweet spot of parenting right now where they are old enough that I can have a lengthy conversation with them, but they're young enough that they still want to hang out with me. So I'm really enjoying that. I cannot say I'm particularly enjoying working from home full time with them remote learning here. It has been challenging, certainly not an arrangement that I ever imagined for myself as a caregiver. Once my children started preschool, I really thought that was pretty much the end of me having to share my workspace with them during the day. A pandemic was not on my radar of things that I thought I was going to have to deal with as a caregiver ever. So there has been a lot of learning, and I'm excited to share with you today some tips and strategies, and learning as we're all learning how to give ourselves a break. So let's just get started. So if you want to think about the pandemic as a wall, and it doesn't have to be the pandemic. I think of any challenge you've come across as a caregiver. It could be your childcare cancels at the last minute. There's a snow day at your childcare center, or your babysitter cancels. Or perhaps you are going to have a big presentation and your internet goes out. Or or there's a pandemic and suddenly you're sharing your house with all these children and your partner and no one has their own workspace and it's just a lot. That is the wall. The challenge is your wall. And this is just part of life. There are disappointing times. We are all hitting a lot of them now. If you are like an egg and a challenge happens, you're going to fall apart, right? You're going to crack. The egg cracks under the challenge. But if you can be a ball, you're able to bounce back. And that is what we're going for today. We're going for a set of skills, a set of strategies that can help you be way more like the ball and less like the egg when these challenges, both expected and unexpected, occur. So essentially today we're going to talk about resilience skills, right? So sticking with things, not giving up, believing in yourself, and being able to bounce back. Resilience, it's really hard. I basically cannot talk about taking care of yourself without talking about resilience, because given the circumstances that we're all in right now, it's become an essential daily life skill. So every day we're faced with new challenges, new things that we didn't expect, and resilience is that essential human ability to overcome and thrive in the face of the unexpected. So again, if you think of it, if someone says, oh, she's so resilient, you might think, oh, I guess she hasn't had a very hard life. It's actually the opposite of that, right? It's not the absence of challenge, but how we are able to bounce back and deal with the situation. One of the first and most prolific researchers on resilience, Ann Maston, coined this phrase ordinary magic when referring to resilience. And I think this term fits perfectly because once we take resilience apart and examine it a little bit, turns out developing and enhancing resilience does not actually require that we do anything extreme or unusual at all. It's very, very ordinary skills. These are everyday ordinary skills. But what resilience can do for a person really is magical. So it's a commonplace phenomenon with magical results, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're all going to get an extra dose of resilience. And again, I just want to take a minute to talk about why this is so critical for all of us as caregivers. Resilience, research shows that resilience helps people be happier and more satisfied no matter what's going on in their lives. So that right there is a great reason for anybody to work on the resilience skills. Happier, more satisfied. That's something that we could all use a dose of, especially during a pandemic. But when you're a caregiver of, perhaps you've got older relatives you're taking care of, maybe you've got some kids at home with you, maybe you've got a sibling who needs extra help. When you're a caregiver, resilience isn't just a nice to have, it's actually critical for your stress level. So it's both a skill that you need to work on and it becomes a coping strategy, both things. So again, resilience doesn't mean that you don't have experience with difficulty or that you go out of your way to avoid difficulty and challenges. It means that you've got these coping strategies to make you more tolerant to stress. And again, why is that important for caregivers? Because there is stress. Something is always going to happen when you're a caregiver. You can have every single thing planned out for the whole day. You can have your lists, you can have all your ducks in a row, T's crossed, I's dotted. Something's going to happen. Like, you're going out to the park and you've got the snacks packed and you've got the diaper bag and you've got the sunblock and you've got all the things that you need. And then you're on your way out the door and there's a diaper blowout. This is just what happens for caregivers, because unfortunately, there's a lot that's not within your control. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that is why these resilience skills and coping mechanisms are so critical to you being able to take care of yourself, because you need and also it's important to be able to model resilience for those that you're taking care of. If you are able to model resilience, you're actually helping the people around you build their own resilience. So again, which leads to more satisfaction, happier people. Just want to make a quick note to say that personality or temperament in a person does have a little bit to do with how resilient a person is. But, and I'm sure you can probably think about people that you know in your life who naturally are more resilient people. But I really want to emphasize that every single person is born with the capacity for resilience, and it's like a muscle. So you grow it or you lose it. So even if your personality or temperament is a little bit less, it makes it a little bit harder to be resilient, it doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to do it. You might just have to work that muscle a little bit harder. So it's not always going to be a perfect practice. But in order to, maybe good time to do some self-reflection and think about yourself, like is it easy for me to be resilient? Is it difficult? And then just be intentional about growing that skill, because it really is. It's just like working out at the gym. It's a decision that you have to make, that today I'm going to really work on those resilience muscles. So how do we do that? How do we build resilience in ourselves and the people that we're caring for? I want to talk about taking care of yourself, which I know is the title of today's talk. But I needed to unpack that with you all a little bit. Again, like I've mentioned, I've been a caregiver for decades, and there's no formula for handling today's world successfully without bumps and bruises. So it makes a lot of sense that everyone's feeling more stressed and more anxious. And what I want to talk about is how much we influence others' resilience and happiness and ability to take care of themselves by modeling that. So I want to mention that this really is a critical strategy. You all know those metaphors about putting on your own oxygen mask before you put on someone else's oxygen mask. I'm going to use the pitcher metaphor here. You can't fill up everyone else's cups if your pitcher's empty. It's not just a cute mental image. It's really, really true. You have to be good to yourself, and that trickles down to everyone in your sphere. If you are low resilience, if you are low energy, if you are feeling down, if you have not taken good care of yourself, that trickles down to everyone in your household. So this is not a nice to have. This is an absolute must do. I also just want to challenge you all to think a little bit about what your schema is for taking care of yourself. Like, what is that when you think of self-care? That's kind of a buzzword. We hear it all the time. When you think about self-care, what does that look like in your head? So I don't know about you, but for me, self-care used to look like booking a vacation or going to get a massage at my favorite spa in the next town over. COVID has really, really changed that. A lot of the things that I used to do to fill up my own cup, fill up my own pitcher, have become not possible with the pandemic. So we've all had to adjust our schema, but I'm going to flip to the next slide. I want you all to take a minute to look at these different dimensions of self-care. Now, this is something that I've been really working pretty hard on the last few months. There's not just that one type of self-care. I think I used to really think of self-care as just being the physical. Like, I've got to, eat my vegetables, get some sleep, got to exercise. Good, checked out my boxes, self-care done. Not true. I've done a lot of research on this, reading about it, and especially because everyone's been struggling the last 11 months. It turns out there's lots of dimensions of self-care. So we've got our social self-care. This has been a really tough dimension of self-care for everyone. What that looks like now is calling and texting with friends. For me, it used to be, meeting my friends for dinner on a Friday night. I still am able to go out for walks with friends occasionally, masked and distanced, but it's a dimension of self-care that's definitely suffered. We've got your mental self-care. So are you making time to feed your brain with things that excite you? And this might look like reading a book or doing a puzzle. It might look like listening to your favorite podcast. It might be reading the newspaper, getting your favorite literary magazine in the mail, going to the library or browsing online for new books. That mental self-care is very important to fill yourself up and be revived. Emotional, spiritual, again, this is very personal, but it can look like anything from journaling and meditation to praying. I really want to emphasize how important that is during these times. And then there's the practical stuff. This one's really overlooked quite a bit. If you aren't taking the time to do that practical self-care of paying your bills, doing the dishes, like cleaning the bathroom, it actually really does wear on you, and your stress level can go up without you even realizing it until it's just like another thing that's in your face that's driving you nuts. So I want to just give you all a second to look over the slide and think about your own self-care. I bet there's something on this list that you are doing a pretty good job of. And I bet there's something on this list that immediately jumped out at you as an area for improvement. Something to think about. Okay, let's talk a little bit about routines and rituals. So I just gave you my little spiel about self-care practices, but how do you actually make time to take care of yourself? How do you actually build in this time to work on your resilience skills? So essentially, you're going to have to schedule it and make it part of your routine. And I know that sounds like a flippant comment, like, oh, she has no idea how busy I am. How am I going to do that? But it really is, if you think about adults and children really are happier with routine and predictability in place. If you think about every morning, you probably get out of bed and brush your teeth, and it's not even something you have to think about anymore. It is absolutely just part of, it is a scheduled routine thing that you do without thinking about it. And then you've taken care of your body. It's like one of those physical self-care things. Check it off the list. So that is basically how I'm going to encourage you all to think about that thing on the last slide, that thing that you know is kind of bothering you, like, not really making enough time for that. You need to figure out a way to schedule it into your day so it's not like a non-negotiable. So like the way I really, and this also helps a lot with less pleasant tasks. For example, I don't like doing the dishes. I don't like flossing very much. These are things that I don't look forward to, but if I skip them or don't do them, it ends up causing me more stress and or like dental pain if I skip it. So I have to schedule it. I do the dishes the same time every night. And as a caregiver, this is really hard for me. I have to dig deep sometimes. It seems fundamentally unfair to me some days that I had to shop for the food, prep the food, cook the food, serve the food, and then I still have to clean up the dishes. But a lot of times I'm the only caregiver in the house. I've got these people who depend on me. So this is what it comes down to. And I know that part of my self-care routine is taking the 10 minutes right now to do the dishes so I can move on with my night, and I will feel so much better and less stressed if I just get it done now. So I've just scheduled as part of my evening, cross it off the list, it's just done. And the other great part about scheduling these tasks and making them a routine is that it reduces the number of decisions you're making as a caregiver. So, analysis paralysis and decision fatigue are something, it's like a real point of stress for caregivers. We have to make 1 million decisions a day, not only about our well-being, but about the well-being of those that we care for. So if you just make some of these things that are like areas for improvement for you, if you just make them part of like a rote part of your day, it's one less decision you have to make. You don't ever have to think, should I brush my teeth today or not? It's really just, yes, I always do that at this time of day and it's part of my routine and it's just done. I also want to talk about some positive things that bring you comfort should also be part of your routines and rituals every day. So again, you give a lot of yourself every day as a caregiver, you sacrifice a lot for others. And I want to encourage you to create a space in your day that brings you comfort and make that also part of your routine and ritual so that it's not something that you skip unless there's like a really extenuating circumstance. So for me, my morning cup of coffee is a non-negotiable ritual. So I set the coffee pot for myself the night before. I come downstairs in the morning and I have, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 15 minutes, depends on what's going on with the people that I take care of every day. But I have that time to just take a deep breath, think about my day. And I get sometimes I snuggle up with my dog on the couch and the blankie, and sometimes it's snowing and sometimes it's summer and I'm watching the flowers, but it's something that happens every single morning. It grounds me. And because it's become part of my ritual, I don't skip it. My family knows that's part of the deal. And everyone I cannot emphasize enough. So think about routines and rituals, things that are maybe less pleasant tasks that you need to tackle, and also things that'll bring you some comfort and stress relief. Another tactic for taking care of yourself is this idea of mental reframing and gaining perspective. So perspective is super powerful. It's the way you approach your day and your world is often shaped by years of experience, and we all lead to assumptions and interpretations of things that are actually inaccurate based on years of experience. So give my little plug here for curating your social media. Social media is a really big example of one of the biggest offenders for skewing perspective. So what you're seeing on social media, just a friendly reminder, those shiny, happy photos of all those families who are having a fantastic time during the pandemic, baking the bread and reading the books and doing crafts and all these things, it's not reality, right? Those are the best snapshots of their whole day, and seeing those things can often skew our own perspective on what's going on in our own home, which makes us feel less resilient, more stressed, and it's harder to take care of yourself and the people in your house when you're feeling that way. So there's been a lot of research on this topic, and one of the most powerful and simple techniques for increasing your resilience is being mindful of, and in some cases, reframing the interpretations of things you have in your head. So I'll give you an example. So over this, I guess it was early summer, a few months into the pandemic, I decided that we were going to go drive to the local park and take a walk with our dog. So I did all the things. I got everyone loaded up, and the snacks and the shoes, everything I described earlier. Got in the car, driving through town. My car broke down. Well, it started overheating. So I don't know a lot about cars, but I decided to pull over, and now we're stuck on the side of the road. Thankfully, I was able to pull over somewhere safe on a side street away from traffic, and it was a nice day out. So I've basically had this moment where I had to decide how I was going to react to this situation. So, in my mind, one of three ways to react. I could react with, why does this always happen to me? I could react with, this is super annoying, but it's not the worst thing. Or I could react with, what a great opportunity to get out of the car and stretch my legs and play right here in this neighborhood with my kids. Okay, so none of those reactions are wrong in that situation. There's no wrong way to react. But your initial knee-jerk reaction to that scenario that I just described might be a very rudimentary measure of your level of optimism and resilience. So, and there's a million different factors that can affect how you'd react in a situation like that. Like if it was a stormy, rainy day, do we have snacks in the car? Is someone about to have a diaper blowout? All these things, right, can go into your resilience level and level of optimism. But if it's a safe place to wait and you've got your snacks in the car and it's a nice day out, you have the choice. You have that opportunity to take a beat, take 10, 20, 30 seconds in the front seat of your car, take that deep breath and decide, how am I going to react right now? Not just for the kids in the back seat, but for myself. How can I frame this? And I can tell you in real life, that day, my resilience was pretty high for whatever reason. I was feeling pretty optimistic. My resilience was pretty high. I had all those other factors going for me, those external factors. I was in a safe neighborhood, had the snacks, was a nice day outside. My kids and I ended up having a sidewalk picnic while I waited for a friend to come and pick us up. And it ended up being this really sweet memory that we all have. And it doesn't always go that way. But whenever I think about reacting in that way, that's like, why me? Why does this stuff always happen to me? I can think back to that day that I made a different choice and I can reframe. Oh boy, so let's see. I wanted to emphasize that it really is a learnable skill. So you don't always have control over your day. And there's a lot of things certainly right now that we don't have control over, but the message that you give yourself and the message that you're giving to others in your household will impact them, and it can influence other people's positive thinking. So if your children or the people you're taking care of see you regularly practicing that positive thinking, you are modeling for them all the time, and it'll be a skill that they'll be able to adopt and develop themselves. So another great way to build some resilience. Finding joy. Okay, so this one, I know it sounds really simple, but building off the reframing skill, I want to make a plug for finding a sense of humor. Finding some joy in situations when you can. So one way that I like to do this is I make there are certain situations in our house that often lead to crankiness, lead to some bickering. I'm sure that you all know the kinds of situations I'm talking about. So one way I've found to make things less stressful for myself and make it easier for us all to take a break from the bickering and the fighting and the stress is to make some things silly right off the bat. So if it's time one of the hot button situations in my house right now is cleaning up toys. We have an area in our home, basically always looks like a disaster just happened. Something's always spilled, the blocks are out, the Legos are everywhere. And it's a source of stress for me. It makes me upset to come downstairs at the end of the day and see this room a complete wreck. Even though I know it means that my kids were laughing and having fun and learning and playing, all those wonderful good things were happening. For me, at the end of the day, it's visually jarring to come downstairs and see this room that's been destroyed. So instead of approaching that, I like to reframe the situation and not just approach it with a positive attitude, but even just inject some humor and silliness into it. So I love saying, okay, to my youngest son, I'll say, can we clean up this? We're going to clean up the playroom now, and we're going to be puppies while we do it. And we crawl around and be puppies, right? Or can we do this and be bunny rabbits and hop around and do it? And just starting off what I know is going to be a sticky situation, starting it off with humor and joy flips the whole thing on its head. And suddenly we're smiling and we're laughing. And speaking of smiling, cannot recommend enough walking into a room with a smile on your face when you're facing the people that you're taking care of. So again, kids, adults. There's a great TED talk actually by Ron Gutman about the power of smiling. It's not necessarily faking it. It's really just that something happens physiologically to your body and your brain when you smile, and it's contagious. Your body chemistry can change. It can actually change the body chemistry of the people in the room with you. So if you can just start interactions with that stance of positivity, I'm telling you, I know it sounds a little hokey, but it will build your resilience and it will make it possible for you to have less stress. Another way of finding joy, again, just want to circle back to something I said a couple of slides ago about building in that time each day, part of your routines and rituals to do something that brings you joy. And I know that a lot of us don't feel like we have spare time to spend on ourselves and our hobbies, but I've found that it's not, sometimes I have to build it into the day. So for example, I really enjoy being outdoors. I live near the woods. I love taking walks in the woods. So I know that's going to bring me joy every day. So now it is part of a ritual during the pandemic, during remote learning, that I will take a walk every day with my kids, 20 minutes sometimes. And I do have to schedule it. I have to say, when is your break? When is my break? When is his break? And some days it's a miss, but it's part of a ritual. It's part of a routine. That means there's no fighting about it. We're not going to debate it. It's just, this is the thing that we're going to do in all the weather in New England. We're going to get our boots on. We're going to go outside for 20 minutes a day, and we're going to see the trees and the sky, and we're going to breathe air that's not the air that's been in our house for the last 11 months. And we're going to do this together. And, so if you like to read, make story time a part of your day. If you like to take hikes, make outdoor time part of your day every day. Just make that time to find something that will bring you joy, and it will trickle down to those folks that you take care of. Okay, next tip, relationships and connections. So children and adults are happier and feel more stable when they're surrounded by people who love them, full stop. There is an expanse of research on children and resiliency. The Center on the Developing Child at Harvard has done a ton of research on children and resilience, and they've found that the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is having at least one stable, committed relationship with a supportive parent or caregiver or any adult in their lives. And that's a fact. The research has proven this over and over again. And I like to argue that it's the same thing for adults. So we all need that committed, stable, supportive relationship in our lives. And it's not necessarily your partner. It might be a best friend. It might be a neighbor. It might be a host of people. I have a little whole pod, for lack of a better word, of support people that I rely on regularly. And during the pandemic, what that looks like is it's a daily text thread where we're checking in on each other. I do Zoom, a Zoom cocktail hour with my friends. These things, again, are not nice to have. They're really critical to take care of yourself and feel connected right now during the pandemic. It's really the foundation upon which everything else is built. So if you're an introvert, again, that doesn't mean you have to have these big cocktail hours or like giant, outdoor walks with neighbors. Maybe there's just one person where if you checked in on them and with them once a day, really build up your resilience. We are frequently asked to do a lot as caregivers and resolve a lot of issues that kind of seem impossible for one person to handle. So I also want to encourage you all to make necessary connections in your communities for when you do need extra help. So I know it's a pandemic. It's not easy to just drop your kids off with the neighbors if you need a break. I understand there's all kinds of health and safety measures we have to abide by, but that doesn't mean that you have to feel trapped. If you need a break, again, reach out via text to people. You can ask for help from people in your community if you need help if you just cannot make the grocery run with your toddler who's overtired and needs a nap. Ask your neighbor if they can drop off the loaf of bread or a gallon of milk on your front stoop. Completely COVID safe. And you're asking for help and you're getting the support that you need. There's plenty of Facebook groups, lots of places where you can, on social media, where you can feel connected to people in your community. And also I want to encourage everyone to have a list of companies and agencies on hand that can help in terms of a sudden crisis, or if there's a sudden decline in the health of someone you're taking care of, just so you'll be ready, just so you feel prepared. So there's these wonderful personal relationships that we need to rely on right now, but there's also just the larger connections that we need in our community just to make us feel less alone. This is all really important stuff. Okay, so we're going to do a quick review of what I've covered today. I want to encourage you all as adult learners to get out a piece of paper and a Post-it note right now. I know you're all at your desks, or if you have your iPhone, get out your notes on your phone, and I want you to write down or type out one thing on this list that I covered today that you are going to try this evening. I am sure that there is something I said today that gave you that little like bell in your head, that little like gut punch right here where you're like, yeah, I need to work on that for myself and for the people that I love. So I'm going to encourage you to take a moment right now, write it down. I can tell you right now, I am fighting so hard to make that physical exercise part of my daily routine and ritual. And I am very close to making it a thing that's going to stick. And I am excited about it, but it needs more attention. And really quickly, I want to just take one more minute to talk about our the program details that are available to you as employees. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but I just want to make sure you're all aware that there is backup care available to all of you through Bright Horizons. So you can read the details here. You can have you can drop a child off at one of our childcare centers. You can have in-home care, a caregiver come to your home to take care of elders. Your copays are waived right now for March and April, so take advantage of this. It's a huge, huge perk. And if you have any questions about the details of this backup care that's available to you, there's a website there, families.uci.edu, or you can email Diane there. And I think it's just a wonderful advantage you should take advantage of. And then if you're curious a little bit more about those backup care options, the center-based care, there are centers near you open right now for childcare. We have worked with pediatricians at Children's Hospital here in Boston to make sure our COVID-19 protocols are up to date. Our protocols are rigorous. You should not feel anxious about dropping your child off there. Our centers are wonderful and clean. We also have the in-home care option available for infants through adults. So someone can come to your home and help you out with that. And then also we have this wonderful caregiver where you can list childcare needs that you have. We have pet sitting, housekeepers, virtual sitting. I don't know if any of you have done this during the pandemic. If you need a break, like we were just talking about, giving yourself a break, you can actually have a virtual babysitter sit on Zoom with your child and run activities and engage with them so that you can go in the next room and shut the door and sit and do your belly breaths and give yourself that stress relief that you need. Okay, I think we are, one more benefit really quick. We have this amazing website for those of you who are home with little people called World at Home we have taken all of the activities from our Bright Horizons childcare centers and adapted them for home use using materials that you should have around your home. So we've got STEM activities, crafts, we've got language, we've got virtual story times, cooking activities, anything, you name it. Please visit worldathome.brighthorizons.com. And there's a ton of stuff there that can fill up a nice rainy day like we're having here in Boston. And with that, I think we are ready for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Great. Thank you very much, Claire. That was wonderful. We have the first question, which is from Kathy, and she asked, do you have any tips for caring for aging parents who seem to have lost their joy and feel like they are giving up?
Oh, I think, first of all, my heart goes out to anyone that's in that particular situation. I mean, it's really hard to feel so isolated right now. And I think Everyone is feeling that, regardless of their age and circumstance. My best advice is to try to find that joy where you can. So if you can think back to anything that they used to enjoy when they were feeling more themselves. So for example, if they used to be an avid reader, can you present them with a bunch of audiobooks, or can you have like a daily time of the day where you're reading aloud to them? And there's that connection happening combined with an activity that they used to really enjoy. I really firmly believe that one of the biggest stressors we're all facing right now is that lack of physical connection we're having with people outside of our own home. So another great opportunity is if you have any children in your life, maybe you've got some nieces or nephews, or your neighbors have kids, setting up a visiting time with them where they could read stories together via Zoom, or even maybe sit outside distanced if the weather's not too bad where you live, and have that face-to-face interaction, because that joy that activity can bring them, if you can find a way to adapt it right now, it's going to make a huge world of difference. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Claire, I do have a question. It has to do with, where we're all, keeping in touch with family and friends by telephone or by Zoom. They're all trying to do the same things that we're trying to do, and that is, stay resilient and make these connections. Is there anything that we should be listening to with the people that we talk to maybe, tell if they're struggling? Because people will often, put on their best face. So what should we be listening for as we talk to people that we haven't seen face to face in a while?
Oh, what a great question. So I think it's easiest, obviously, to pick up on signs of real distress and stress in those that we do speak with regularly. And I want to encourage any of you to not hesitate to have those difficult conversations with folks who are in your inner sphere. If you notice any behavior changes in mood, changes in habits. I myself am living with a about to be teenager, so I struggle on a daily basis of whether some of her behavior is developmentally typical teenage behavior, or whether she's showing me signs of real stress and distress. And the way that I've decided to handle that is to have those difficult conversations. I find that if I approach these conversations with vulnerability, it's often met with honesty and vulnerability. So if I say, like, my defenses are down, I love you, I care about you, I'm concerned about you. How are you doing? Really, really vulnerable, really, really open. That's when sometimes those honest conversations can happen. And I would say, Brian, in terms of people who you don't see very often, embrace that vulnerability. I mean, if you're comfortable, I really feel, and I have done this with colleagues of mine where I've said at the end of a meeting, hey, how are you doing? And I really mean it, like looking in that camera at that person's face and saying, or offering a little bit of your own vulnerability. I'm having a really tough time right now. It was my dad's birthday and I always see him and I missed it, and I'm feeling upset about it. And I was just wondering if you've been through anything similar. And just opening up that little bit really lets other people feel less I think we've all in the last 11 months built up a lot of guards, and we've tried to tell ourselves that this is going to be fine and this is normal. It's not normal. It feels sort of normal because it's been 11 months, but this is, I mean, my middle son's coming up on his second pandemic birthday in March. I can't stand the word unprecedented anymore, but this is unprecedented. This kid's going to miss 2 birthday parties and he's 10 years old. So embrace it. Like embrace how wrong this feels to many of us on so many levels. And I think that advice, again, goes for those people that you live with, who you see every single day. And it goes for the colleague. I had a colleague a couple weeks ago who said to me, kind of bravely, would you want to have a cup of coffee over Teams sometime? Like, and we live in the same city. If we were in person, we'd be going to the same office every day and having a cup of coffee without a second thought. And she opened up, and I could see and I realized she's feeling lonely. And she's asking me if I'd be willing to hang around after a meeting next week and have a cup of coffee with her and talk about what movie did you see, and what are you planning to do for the summer, and those things, they boost that resilience, and it's a way of taking care of ourselves. So I really want to encourage everyone, just no one's gonna make you feel bad if you admit that you're having a tough time right now.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Kathy, thank you for your ideas, by the way, about reading to an older parent or older adult. So thank you for that. We have another question from AJ, who asks, what are some daily skills that you can develop to increase resiliency?
Yeah, so a lot of the things I mentioned today. So when you feel, I think we all know, or something you can practice is recognizing when you're starting to get frustrated and stressed, and taking it is just like exercise. Like I mentioned, it's just like forcing yourself to lift up that weight and work that bicep muscle when you're doing a curl. It's the same thing. It's taking that brief 5 to 10 second pause and reframing, right? So reframe your thinking. Is this actually going to be as bad as I think it's going to be? Is there any silver lining here? How can I reframe this for the people in the room so it doesn't seem like an awful, horrible thing that's about to happen? So reframing your perspective, realizing, you don't have control over everything, letting go of the things that you can't control. Asking for help is another great way to build resilience. I think, again, we've all gotten really good at trying to exist in our own spheres these days and be self-reliant, and it's not necessary. You have a community that cares about you, whether it's at work, in your neighborhood, with your own family, your natal family, the family that you've created with your partner, and you have people who care about you. You don't have to do it by yourself. So that is a practice. Asking for help, it's not easy to do. It sounds so simple, but it's not, especially for busy professionals like all of you. So I think those are my top ones. And the self-care too, another great way to build resilience. Whatever that thing is that you know that you need to work on, the thing that you know that in that list that I mentioned, that thing you know you need to do it. Make time for it. Make it a priority.
Great. We actually have a live question from our head of wellness for the university, Diane Hall. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I just had a question about how we go about justifying to our families or those around us when we're taking the time to practice that self-care without having that guilt, a little bit of unforeseen guilt that there's a million other things we should be doing versus what we want to be doing. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So I have had to have those conversations in my house. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that I had been really ignoring my own physical health the first 6 months of this pandemic. I was on such a go, go, go. I think part of it was adrenaline. I hadn't realized that I was kind of out of shape physically. My sleep was suffering, my diet was suffering. So I did turn it around a little bit. And some of those things are easier to institute without affecting other people's lives. However, the big thing that did seem to have a ripple effect was making the time to exercise, because suddenly now there's 30 minutes in the morning where mom has decided she's not available. I can't get your bowl of Cheerios for you. No, I can't help you look for your Chromebook. You were supposed to charge that last night, remember? No, I'm not going to help you fold your laundry. And that saying no over and over again initially felt really bad. Again, I'm going to be vulnerable with all of you. It felt bad to say no to these adorable little people in my home who look up to me and count on me. But what I did was I said, I'm teaching them to be a little more self-reliant, but also I said to them, I need to fill up the pitcher before the pitcher can pour into your cup. And I actually, that slide, that analogy that I showed you, you can actually show that way. You've got a preschooler in your home. You can say, what happens if I take the coffee pot and it's empty and I try to pour it into my cup? Nothing happens. That's how mom feels when she doesn't get to exercise. She feels like this coffee pot with no coffee in it. Ha ha ha, make it silly, make it funny, make it something they can understand, and then fill it up with water and say, guess what happens when mom fills up the pitcher? She can pour into your laundry cup. She can fill into the story time cup. She can fill into the I'm going to help you with your math homework cup. She can fill into the drive you to soccer practice cup. All the cups in the family get filled up if mom gets to fill up her own cup first. And so for me, that works out that I can now, it took some work and it's still a work in progress, but 30 minutes every morning, do not disturb mom. She is exercising and it is important. And sometimes my exercise looks like a meditation, like in repose on the floor, but sometimes it's, I'm on my poor Peloton bike, fake Peloton bike in the basement, and I'm sweating, and that's excellent for my stress level too, right? Both of these things are so important. So saying no sometimes can lead to more yeses later in the day.
Great, Claire, thank you so much for the presentation and the answers to the questions. These are definitely topics that we're all dealing with. So I'm going to turn it back to Pamela. Thank you for being with us.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Hal and Brian, for co-hosting, and to Claire for being a great speaker. As a reminder, we will have this presentation and the recording available on our website within another day or two. And up on your screen, you have our remaining 4 topics. So we'd love to see you every Tuesday at 11. We're here with different co-hosts, different senior leaders in the middle column there, and then also different speakers on the right. So hopefully you found this helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in the weeks ahead. Take care, everybody.